IVM.
Have you heard your child ask, "Where did I come from, Mama?" or "Where did I come from, Papa?" Many of us may not realize this, but this is a milestone moment in parenthood. Your child has just started wondering about his or her identity and perhaps even sexuality. But many of us fritter away this opportunity by either avoiding answering the question altogether or covering it with euphemisms. Join us, Meghna and Devishobha, in this episode of the Big Talk about tiny humans, where we uncover why talking about sex and sexuality with even young children is not just important, but can be very, very comfortable too. Almost every job in the world requires training, except parenting.
You need to learn parenting on the job, and that can be really hard.
Here on Big Talk about tiny humans, we want to help you navigate the world of parenting better and make your lives a little bit easier.
Hi everyone, I'm Meghna.
And hi, I'm Devishobha.
Every week we bring you the best research on parenting,
Top tips from experts,
and actionable strategies to confront the numerous challenges that all parents and educators face.
So let's get started, shall we? As parents, we often dread the moment the S word will take its place in our children's minds. Many of us are clueless about how to respond to questions and situations around sex and sexuality, let alone open the topic willingly by ourselves. Why is it even necessary in the first place, you may wonder? Well, it is important because sexuality isn't just about sex. Talking about sex and sexuality and bodies from when your child is young can help your child understand that they are healthy parts of life. The key early message is that your child can come to you for open, honest, and reliable information, and that your child shouldn't feel scared or embarrassed to ask you about sex and sexuality. Join us, Meghna and Devishobha, in this episode of the Big Talk about Tiny Humans podcast, where we uncover why talking about sex and sexuality with young children is not only important, but can be very easy and comfortable as well. Hi, Meghna, how are you doing?
Hi Shobha, I'm doing good. I've just come back from this amazing trip and I'm still in that mode, I guess.
I know, I saw your pictures and I was so jealous.
Well,
And I hope you
I
had a great
highly
time.
recommend all parents to vacation without their kids because you don't realize how much you need to catch up on. It does wonders for your relationship, for your couple relationship. And I think we've not just come back rejuvenated by ourselves, but I think we've come back stronger as a couple. So I mean, it took my husband 1 year, by the way, to convince me. I was like, what fun is a holiday without kids? I'm not never traveling without my kids. And he's like, listen, let's just try it. And it took him 1 year to convince me. And I finally gave him the consent for 3 days. So he did whatever he could manage in 3 days, and it turned out to be super.
I know, I was following your pictures and you looked great. And yeah, it was amazing. And
Thanks.
I remembered my vacation without the kids and I loved it too. So yeah, I
Oh,
totally,
nice.
totally can relate to that.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Okay, great. So about today's topic, Meghna,
Well, guess what? It's the it's the most dreaded
yeah,
word, as you said,
yeah.
right? The S word. I don't think like my parents never
Neither
spoke
did
to me
mine.
about
Neither did
any of the
mine. Yeah.
aspects,
I know.
right?
I can
I
see my. I
mean, they
can
did not
totally see
have
my mother
even
going
one.
red in the face.
Right. I mean, I think this is such a taboo topic for Indian parents. And I don't know how this episode is going to be
Yeah,
received by our Indian audience. But the one thing that I can promise to all the parents listening to this right now is that, you know what, this is one of our most important episodes because sex is not just about sexual intercourse. It is also about gender and sexuality and boundaries and consent and respect and so
absolutely.
much more. So please do
Yes,
listen in.
absolutely. So, Meghna, starting with this, ubiquitous question that every parent must have heard at least once in their lives. What is a good answer to this? How did I come? Where did I come from? What do you say?
Well, you know what I would say to that question? Beta, there are a lot of ways, and what you say next to your child after saying there are a lot of ways, the amount of detail that you go into really depends on how much you think your child can comprehend. So you might try something like this, two grown-ups get their bodies together and share the sperm and the egg to make a child like you, or sometimes they get the sperm or egg from someone else. And that is a very good starting point to talk about where did I come from. It's very important for you to use words like womb, talk to your child about their own birth story, which basically lets you tailor the details to your family's specific situation, right? Just the point is that it's just important not to lie. It's important not to say things like the stock brought you or we prayed and we got you and things like that, right? So of course, as your child grows up, you can add more details, you can make it more age appropriate, but it's important actually to follow up with the questions that your child is asking and not just refuse to talk about certain things.
Absolutely. Thanks, Meghna. And on this note, let's take a very short break. Stay with us because there's more to come on answering your most confounding questions about making children comfortable with their growing bodies.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. On The Habit Coach, Ashton delves into the power of meditation with spiritual guide Swami Purna Chaitanya. On Misconduct, Ragvi and Nisha tell us the story of Neha Verma, who killed 3 women in cold blood. On Cyrus Says Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Puneet, Utsav and Antariksh talk about the Tamil Nadu woman who disguised herself as a man for 36 years to avoid sexual harassment. On The Longest Constitution, Priya takes a look at the contest between private, commercial and constitutional interests. And on Big Talk about tiny humans, Devishobha and Meghna tell us how we can raise awareness about child sexual abuse. We've got some exciting news for you. IVM Podcasts has just launched its merch and our first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcasts website and click on the shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any platforms you're listening on. You can also check us out on YouTube. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate if you could spare a few minutes to fill it. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: SBI Life Insurance, Jupiter, a digital banking app, and Cap Gemini. Get the future you want.
So, welcome back from the break, and thank you, Meghna, for that wonderful response. On this note, I just want to ask you a few follow-up questions on, grabbing teachable moments, from the examples that you gave regarding the question, the evergreen question that comes from children. I come, right? So, what are some good teachable moments that we can grab to, introduce children to the topic of sex? Not that they really need that introduction from us, but we really need them to be comfortable talking to us about that topic, right? So, what do you recommend as some good teachable moments for a conversation to go smoothly?
I think that's a very good question, Shobha, because when we picture talking to kids about sex, we picture us sitting in a drawing room having somber expression on our faces and saying, what, beta, let us talk. But actually,
that never happened.
But actually, that will never happen. And it should not happen like that. Actually, that's the worst way in which you can talk to your kids about sex and sexuality. And so, teachable moments is a very, very good approach to broach this topic. And there are teaching moments galore every single day, like the time that you're changing your child's clothes if they're young, the time that you're bathing them, you're talking about bodies and private parts, and consent and what is private and what is not, the time when you're talking to your primary schooler about their friends and you're talking about relationships and how they are showing respect in their friendships. All of this is actually conversations about sex and sexuality. When you're watching a movie together and a kissing scene comes or a making out scene comes, when your child is scrolling social media, when your teen is scrolling social media, and you want to talk to them about online risks and safety, when you want to talk about the hookup culture because of certain songs that your child is listening to, or a song comes up on the radio when you're going somewhere together in the car. So all of these are teachable moments. They enable you to talk about a whole lot of issues, which is not just sexual intercourse. It is also about what happens in relationships, what do respectful relationships look like, what is emotional closeness. This is also talking about sex. What are healthy boundaries in relationships? How will you figure out how to keep your body safe? This is also talking about sex, right? So talking about sex is not just talking about sexual intercourse. It is talking about all of these things, right? And there are teachable moments galore. So you don't need a specific the talk. You can catch everyday moments and have these conversations.
So this just brings to mind, Meghna, we have this, standard thing called sex education in schools. Obviously, everyone knows that's not even close to adequate. And I know, because of the last 2 years of online education, I have seen firsthand what reactions kids give when teachers talk about even a particular biology lesson, right? All the cameras went off.
It's
And typical reactions, and everybody was smiling away, laughing away, messaging, and very weird reactions. And I can totally imagine how it would have been in a physical classroom. So what do you suggest that sex education should include, and what do you think is really missing from our schools in terms of sex education?
I think that's a very relevant question, and I would specifically urge the parents and educators listening to this episode to pay attention to this, because I think the approach that we take to sex education in schools is completely wrong. It is not just only about the content. I'll actually start with the format. I remember in my school when I was growing up, Shobha, girls were taken out separately and boys were given a separate class. That in itself is wrong in a co-ed school, because it sends the message that what, you cannot talk about these issues with girls and boys together, right? That is wrong. The second thing, in the name of sex education, the girls were only spoken to about periods, not even puberty. And that is why till date, when I meet adults like parents of preteens, they don't know the difference between puberty and periods. They think it's one and the same thing. Okay, so education about puberty is missing completely. The focus is only on getting periods and what to do and what not to do, which is very, very basic information. So I don't think that's completely right at all, or adequate at all. It's not giving children enough knowledge about, what are the physical and emotional changes and brain changes taking place and bodily changes taking place, and what they can do about them. And the third problem with the approach is that we think that it's a one time event, right? एक session कर दिया school में, हो गया, चलो ठीक है, done, our job is done. So the whole approach is very, just a check box, just a tick mark. We've done this kind of thing. But fact is, and research also shows this, that children need, multiple exposures to the same knowledge, to the same information. And that is why when parents and teachers and schools are on the same page with regard to what is important to be discussed, it is super helpful to the kids, because then they won't go running to their peers who are equally clueless, who they won't go running to the internet, which is actually a very wrong source of information, because there is myths and misinformation galore on the internet, right? So the information on the internet is just not reliable, right? So we would rather that the children come to us parents. We would rather that they learn whatever they learn in the name of sex education in schools is repetitive. It's mixed group in the case if the school is co-ed, and it's not done in a manner which is a checkbox. It is done in a consistent, repetitive way with latest, which is updated information about everything, right? So that is about the approach. Now, about the content, don't even get me started. As I said, that it is just such a, eyewash, right? It's just a mere eyewash. Just talking about periods, you're not delivering sex education. I'm sorry. You're only doing that, just talking about periods. If you want to address, if you are delivering sex education, it has to start not at the age of 10 or 12 or 13 when the child is already a preteen or teen. It literally has to start from the age of 3 or 4 or 5 years, because you need to start talking to even young kids about their bodies and what are the names of their genitalia, and when it is, why are these parts private, and why you should not be touching them in public, and so on. So our whole approach to sex education, Shobha, is so wrong. I mean, we think sex education is only something that teens should be exposed to.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. It has to start literally at home from the time the child starts talking, and at school when the child enters their KG.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think you said that very well. Repetitive information, because that's how they learn everything else. Science is not the
Exactly.
concept of science. Concept in a science lesson is not just taught once; it is taught multiple times. They revise before the exam. So why this rush and hush with just this one topic, right? And
We
also,
pass on our own attitudes now, Shobha. By doing this, we're telling the kids, oh, ठीक है, मतलब, ज़्यादा इसके बारे में बात नहीं कर सकते, this is like not to be talked about. It's shameful. It's wrong. You should, I mean, come on, really?
I think one
Seriously?
of the important components of sex education is definitely talking about consent, which is totally missing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
See, when you're talking about sex and sexuality, how can you not talk about consent?
Consent. Exactly. Do you know these statistics, Shobha? And these are just reported statistics, right? 44% of rapes with penetration occur to children under age of 18 years.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
This is not even a joke anymore, right? Victims younger than 12 account for 15% of those raped, right? And the very children who are most vulnerable to sexual abuse and assault, you know, are at an age when their parents have not even broached the subject of consent and sex, and they're not even able to name their private parts.
Yeah.
In fact, young children who do not know the proper words for their genitals are at the risk of sexual victimization because they can't provide a description of what has happened to them.
Yeah, and I would like to tell our listeners at this point that we have covered an entire episode on just this topic of how to, help children, familiarize themselves with their private parts, why it is not okay to use euphemisms, and why it is how to approach your child watching porn, or his or her attitude towards porn. There's an entire episode on that, so please do go back and listen to that for more information on the importance and the, absolutely crucial point about all of this information about sex and sexuality and porn, and how to communicate that with our kids, right? So Meghna,
Absolutely.
yeah, so thanks for this, and this is absolutely great that you have brought up these points. And you also mentioned that we miss some of these because we were talking about teachable moments before, and we talked about how sex education is just approached in with an attitude of one time delivery and then that's it. And we're not making use of teachable moments, not just at home but even in school, right? So can you give us some examples of age appropriate moments that we can use in a community like a school, or at even at home? Like, can you give us some examples from age, in specific age ranges, that
Absolutely.
can further a healthy conversation around sex?
So, okay, so I will be, because there's so much ground to cover here, I will
Right.
be dividing it into three parts, Shobha, talking about body, talking about intimacy, and talking about media. So, body, intimacy, and media, BIM, is what I'll be talking about. And under each, I will be delineating age appropriate strategies that parents and teachers can use to talk to the children about sex and sexuality.
Right.
Okay. So when it comes to body, again, at home for younger kids, whether it's toddlers or preschoolers or even primary schoolers, it is super important, especially because at around 2 to 3 years of age, when children are learning about their body parts, literally in 100% of the charts that you see in schools and homes, which delineate the body parts, the names of the genitals are missing in 100% of the charts. So it's parents and teachers' responsibility to name these body parts. There is no shame in using the words penis, vagina, vulva. buttocks, nipples, breasts. There is absolutely no shame. And it's just shocking and sad how both parents and teachers omit this education completely. So that needs to be done. The second thing, why are they private? Why is it not okay to touch them in public? Why is it not okay to show them to someone else except for your caregiver and maybe the doctor in the supervision of your caregiver? Right? This is extremely, and when you're talking about this, you start talking about consent and safety network, the stuff that we talked about in the previous episode, right? So, talking about private parts and bodily functions is super important, and talking about boundaries. Now, what are boundaries? What are healthy boundaries? What are unhealthy boundaries? The fact that you have the right to say no to something that you're uncomfortable with, something that somebody else is doing and you're uncomfortable with, constitutes healthy boundaries. The fact that you need to assert yourself and be able to say, what, I do not like this. Yeah. Okay. So, talking about boundaries. So, this is all about, again, so when you talk about boundaries, for example, the way you talk about boundaries to, say, a 6-year-old would be slightly different than the way you talk about boundaries to a 14-year-old.
Right.
Because the complexity of relationships becomes such, right? So, obviously, tailor these conversations according to the child's age, according to their social skills. But these skills are still relevant at all ages. Like when we did the episode on assertiveness, remember, we talked about why it's important to teach your child to say no. Because a lot of adult clients that I see in my therapy practice, they have not learned how to enter into safe consensual sexual or romantic relationships. Women face a lot of sexual violence, and the first question is, why are you not being able to speak up and put a stop to this? You are being abused. So it is not something that people can learn on their own. It is not something that you can learn from the internet. I mean, come on. This is our responsibility as parents and educators to teach this. That some things, when you're touched in ways that you don't find okay, it is important to say no. This is your boundary, right? And this lesson again has to be repeated consistently.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay. So that's about body, right? And of course, as your child gets older, you need to start talking about what is birth control, what are STDs, how to keep your body safe, irrespective of whichever situation you find yourself in. And say maybe throw situations at the child, in the classroom setting, outside, at home. Okay, if this happens, you go to a friend's house and you see something that you think is not meant for you. What do? If you go to a party and you feel that somebody's slipped a drug into your drink, what do? Right? Not just girls, even boys need this education. Yesterday itself I saw a case of a client who had grown up in Dubai, and oh my god, what a traumatic history. He was abused at the age of 24, and this is a boy that we're talking about, right? So, this education about body, all right, all this is about body. Talking about body is supremely important in different ways and in age appropriate ways. The second bit that I was talking about is intimacy. Now, this is completely missing from our parenting and education discourses. We just don't talk about what constitutes emotional closeness in relationships, what constitutes respect. See, Shobha, a lot of this is learned via watching our parents, right? A lot of this is not explicated because we just see, oh, this is what. So when we see our parents, what gets wired in our unconscious mind is, oh, this is what a relationship looks like. We don't know if it's healthy or unhealthy. To a child, they're like, oh, this is what a marriage looks like. Oh, okay, like that. And that is what they're guided by those unconscious patterns, and that's what they repeat in their adult relationships. So one thing is talking, but the other thing is modeling. How much are you able to model a healthy, respectful relationship, which is emotionally intimate and yet has healthy boundaries in front of your kids? Right? And what does that mean? Like, for example, when my mom and dad disagree on certain things, what do? How do they resolve it? When my mom wants to watch this TV show and my dad wants to watch that TV show, it's as simple as that, right? What do? It might sound ridiculous. We're talking about sex and we're using the example of, preference for a TV show. How are they even related? Of course they're related, because it's all about how we navigate relationships. Right? So intimacy is also about, and as the child grows up, we need to start talking about this hookup culture. They are exposed, our Indian teens are exposed more than to our Indian TV shows, they're exposed to American TV shows. In every second show, including one of my favorite shows, Friends, right? You see this hookup culture where you go out with your friends for drinks, you hook up with someone in the bar, and you have sex without having an emotional relationship with them. And I am no one to judge. I'm not saying that this is wrong or bad, but I'm just saying, just do this with the awareness that, you know what, I'm responsible for the consequences of my actions. Because it doesn't pan out, Shobha. It doesn't pan out with what I see in therapy. I see people who are suffering from, people who break down and come to me, right? People who suffer from, they're grieving because they lose a person who they hooked up with and who they thought was the person for them. And, just this ability to navigate relationships in a healthy manner.
So you're saying the breakup is because they kind of got emotionally involved and it wasn't reciprocated.
No, I'm not saying that. See, that is obvious. The obviously you will feel bad when the feelings are not reciprocated. But my question is that, are you going into this knowing fully well, one, who you are, and two, what are you expecting from this? Like, if you have a concept of sex with no strings attached, that is fine. But how are you ensuring that the other person is on exactly the same page as you? They have to be on the same page now, Baba, not to get hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like that. And even their respect comes in, right? Sex is not just wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Right? So anyway, so that's about intimacy, right? That's sexual and emotional intimacy. And the third bracket or bucket that I'd like to talk about is talking to kids about media. Again, this begins from an early age. I mean, last 2 years have shown how kids, even young kids, are online, attending their online classes, and how it's important for us to address online risks. What is safe online? What is not safe online? As children grow up, talking about social media, what age is okay to buy their own smartphone, talking about porn, which we discussed in the previous episode. All of this, talking about media, is so important, because, especially because, a parent would say, yeah, but my child doesn't have their own cell phone, so that's fine. But your child's friend has a cell phone, and what they are exposed to on their friend's cell phone is not something that you would know unless you have these conversations with your child. Right? Also, it's super important to talk to your child about what they're watching. It's very important for you to be cued in, because our kids are watching and consuming far more information than we can keep track of. We have to be aware. It's not an option. It's compulsory. It's mandatory that we're aware of what they're viewing. And we need to also then weave in factual information that comes from their world.
Right.
We need to weave in that information, right? But like, while I've discussed these three buckets, right, I would just like to point out one thing. Whenever we are talking to our kids as educators, as parents, about sex, about mutually respectful relationships, about love, about consent, please avoid making it a negative conversation. Don't use like scare tactics. Oh my God, this is what can happen. And don't shame your child. Just be honest and factual. And if you do want to discuss the risks, do that, right? Like, for example, risks associated with having unprotected sex, or risks associated with not knowing, how to protect yourself, how to keep your body safe, or how to draw healthy boundaries. Please do that in a way which is not scaring them.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. And I also do think that not having, healthy conversations around sex can severely affect their self-esteem, body esteem, in ways that can take years of, self-awareness to even come to the fore.
We've even done an episode on this, right? I mean, color esteem is something that we've discussed in one full episode. So I really request the viewers to go check that episode out as well.
So thank you, Meghna. This was wonderful as ever. And to all the listeners out there, I hope you check out this episode in full and understand the nuances of this conversation, and also try it out with your kids as soon as possible. Make use of all the teachable moments. And I hope you enjoy this journey and this conversation just as much as we did. Thank you very much.
So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Big Talk About Tiny Humans, our podcast for parents and educators.
Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family.
Listen and subscribe to Big Talk About Tiny Humans on the IVM Podcasts app, website, and all major audio platforms. We are available everywhere.
You can follow us on social media and online. Meghna is at The Therapist Mommy on Instagram and YouTube. And check out her website, raisingfamilyacademy.com, for a transformative course on raising a child with emotional intelligence.
And Devishobha is at Kidskintha on Twitter and Instagram. And check out kidskintha.com for in-depth articles and events on parenting and child development.
While you're at it, do also check out other great shows from the IVM Podcasts network at shows.ivmpodcasts.com. And IVM is on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
We'll catch you again on our next episode.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy. If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.